Hello everyone, my name is Connor Dixon. I'm from Ballarat Clinical School and I'm here to share with you my research on the impact of pesticide use on farmer health and food sustainability. I've got no disclosures to report and I've just got a brief outline here of my talk. So my talk focuses on farmers, their families and agricultural workers. It focuses on pesticides, how it affects their health and their relationship to food sustainability. It's a very important issue at the moment and even more so in the future. It applies worldwide, but particularly so in the developing world. It's very important for public health because of it's a key driver in the health gap between rural and urban populations. And I'll talk about some of the solutions, including integrated pest management, increasing the training and safe use of pesticides. So what are pesticides? Pesticides are chemicals found in nature or produced synthetically that cause illness in pest species. So we can use these to target and control species such as insects, plants, fungi, and even small mammals. And these pesticides are integral for global food production. However, they do come with some health costs. Now, acute poisoning with pesticides can cause deterioration in cardiovascular, respiratory, and neurological systems. It can cause coma and even death. And unfortunately, pesticides are used commonly as a method of suicide in the developing world. So it's a major issue. As you can see here in the photos on the right, I attended a course this year at the National Centre for Farmer Health, and I learned about the health impacts of chronic low-level exposure to pesticides. And this can result in increased risk of cancer. It can result in endocrine dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction, can result in neurodegeneration, and has been linked with Parkinson's disease, and it also results in cognitive decline. So you might be asking, why do pesticides affect human health if they're there to target an insect? Well, the reason is because the biological systems that they target share between the pest and humans. So I'll just talk you through one example of how this occurs. So we'll talk through the organophosphate pesticide. So if you look in figure 1 here, we've got the nervous system. So the neuron number 1 here will be releasing acetylcholine, and that's a neurotransmitter which will bind to receptors on the downstream neuron and result in downstream effects. And the body tightly regulates this through the use of acetylcholine esterase, which is an enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine so that overstimulation doesn't occur. Now, the problem is when you introduce organophosphates, they inhibit acetylcholine esterase and it results in overstimulation and can cause the acute cholinergic syndrome. And this is a syndrome where people have difficulty breathing, they have nausea, vomiting, blurry vision, cardiac arrhythmias, and result in coma and death. However, the chronic effects of phosphate exposure at lower levels are more intense. They cause death to these neurons and the neurodegeneration, resulting in Parkinson's symptoms, and also causes a state of low-level inflammation, which increases cancer risk. So if pesticides are so bad, why don't we just stop using them? Well, the reason is that we can't stop using them. The world's population is predicted to peak in 2050, 9.7 billion people, and it's been estimated that we need to increase our current agricultural yield of food by 70%. And the reason why we can't stop using pesticides is because of the yield gap. So figure 2 here describes the yield gap. And so the top line is the expected yield under ideal climatic conditions using modern agriculture, using pesticides. This is the yield what we would expect. However, the bottom line is the yield we actually get in the real world. And it's much lower than the yield we expect. And so this is the yield gap. And so in developed countries such as the United Kingdom, it's about 20%. And in developing countries, it's even larger. And so if we stop using pesticides, it would widen this gap, and it would we would have food insecurity in the future. It would result in malnutrition, and many people would face starvation. Interestingly, though, we may be forced to stop using pesticides in the future due to pesticide resistance. So if we overuse pesticides and don't use them properly, our pesticides won't be effective in the future. So, not only should we reduce pesticides for human health, but also for the security of our global food production in the future. So we know we have to reduce our use of pesticides, but we also need to use them more safely. So to increase the safety when we are using pesticides, we need to use adequate personal protective equipment. We need to have it worn properly and have it available. So for the case of the developed world, like countries like Australia, commonly they are available, however, work effectively, and so they're getting exposed that way. In contrast, in the developing world, they're often not available, so farmers are being exposed by a lack of availability of personal protective equipment. However, if it were available, it involves wearing these full body suits, which are quite hot. And many developing countries are situated around the equator where the climate is quite hot, and that would be prohibitive to many of the farmers there. Alternatively, we can isolate the worker away from the pesticides, such as in this cabin in the tractor. However, this is quite expensive technology, and it's probably unrealistic to expect this to be taken up in the developing world. A lot of people put an emphasis on trusting that we'll develop new non-toxic forms of pesticides in the future, which are more selective to pests and non-toxic to humans. However, this is quite expensive to develop, and so people in the third world may not be able to afford this, and they'll be still left with the current pesticides that we have today. And pesticide resistance can always emerge to these new pesticides. So we need to use them safely and in lower amounts. So what are the alternatives we can use to lower the amounts? Well, we can use genetically modified crops, and these are quite promising in that they do increase yield and they use less pesticides. However, resistance to the pesticides and crops can still arise. So it's not our only solution. A lot of people look favorably upon organic agriculture because it uses natural products and it's better for the environment ecologically. However, just because it uses a natural pesticide, it doesn't mean that natural pesticides are non-toxic. They are still toxic to the farmers and they are still toxic to the environment. And the main knock on organic agriculture is that it has reduced yields. So to provide food for the future, we have to clear a lot of land, and that will result in a lot of deforestation and biodiversity loss. So it's clear that there's no silver bullet. We have to use an integrated approach using the best of both worlds. And so one potential solution is integrated pest management. So integrated pest management, it involves still using chemical pesticides, but at lower doses. And to lower the dose, we use biological agents such as crops that secrete their own pesticides, so we can lower the amount of synthetic chemicals we use. And when you're using chemical pesticides, we need to use them at the right time at the most effective dose. And then we need to educate farmers on how to use them safely. We need to educate farmers on when to spray. We need to educate farmers as well on what health effects to look out for from pesticide exposure. And then fourthly, we need to monitor the local ecosystem. We need to monitor the pests we're targeting to identify if resistance is emerging and then cease using those pesticides early. However, this solution, it requires a lot of cooperation between farmers and also from governments and regulatory bodies. So we need farmers to adapt this technology and we need them to use it correctly. However, it does come at a cost at the moment. And so we do require the government or any governments to provide funding to make it more attractive to farmers. So in conclusion, pesticides, they have detrimental health effects on farmers. Acute toxicity is a major issue in the developing world, and chronic low-level exposure is becoming increasingly recognised. Although we need to reduce our pesticides, they're here to stay. They're vitally important to future global food security. And to reduce our pesticide use, we need to educate farmers on how to use them safely. We need to keep pesticide resistance under control. We need to adopt new innovative farming technologies. While costly, down the line, they're going to have less people affected from the health impacts of pesticides and also increase our yields. So here's my reference slide. I look forward to answering any questions you have, and I'd like to acknowledge the following people. So thanks very much for listening.